In this tutorial, I am going to take the simple primitive shapes building that I created in the last tutorial and apply materials to it. Now, materials are what is wrapped around the outside of the geometry of our 3D object. The default is this flat gray that you can see all of these things come in. Now, these are coming in blue. I think it's from a bug. The wireframe won't go away from them, so ignore the fact that those are blue. But the rest of them have this same flat gray texture on them. And we can change that texture using the Hypershade. The Hypershade is this button here, this blue one, the blue circle with the white circle inside of it. And when you open that, it gives you your Hypershade window here. Now, your Hypershade is composed of the browser, which are all of the materials that you're using in the scene. And it should start with this Lambert 1 as a default. That's what all of your new shapes, any primitive or anything else you bring into the scene will start with this Lambert. And a Lambert is a material that is matte. It's not shiny or reflective. There's also some other things we'll talk about at a future time. Down here in this Create tab, I think of this as the store where you can buy more materials to use, and there are a bunch of them. And you can also type in, if you need a specific one, you know the name of it. If I'm looking for blend, I can just type it in here and it'll show me the blends. And when I click on those, they get added to my browser. I also have this graph here that shows how the material is set up, and depending on which one I click on, I can even right click and say Graph Network and see that. That's something we'll discuss later. And on the right side, we have our material viewer, which shows you what it looks like on a material that has a lot of details, and the property editor, which allows us to change the color and other settings of our material. Now, in this case, what I'm going to use is I'm going to use a variety of things. Actually, first I'm going to create a marble material for my columns here. And what I can do with that is I want it to be shiny, so I'm going to use this blend. Blends and fongs are shiny. They have a specular highlight, which is this light area that is the reflection of the light, and we can turn that up and down with this specular shading. I'm going to rename it here because when you have 30 or 40 different materials, blend 1, blend 20, blend 30, Lambert 10, those aren't very descriptive. So I'm going to call this marble. And with the marble, there is a marble texture, but it has to be placed onto one of these materials. So it has to go onto a Lambert or a Fong or a blend. So once you've chosen one of those, I can then click on the node for color. So instead of just choosing a solid color, I'm going to click on this node, which will allow me to choose from a variety of things to use instead of just a normal color. And one of those is marble. When I click on that, now I can change the marble settings. Now the way I put this onto the there's a bunch of ways actually I can put this onto the column. I can select it, right click on the material and say assign material to selection. I can hold down my middle mouse wheel and drag it onto there. And with a lot of these, the only way you can see them on your real-time screen is by hitting 6. That's your shaded display as opposed to 5, which is your regular. So if you drag it on and you don't see it, it's probably still on there. And it's better to use the render view anyway, which we'll talk about in a second. Now that I have that marble, if I double click on this again, you will see that it is my blend. But the color, I can get back to the marble settings because I can click on this to go to that node. So if I click on that, it takes me to the marble node, and I can change the color of the vein. Maybe I want it black instead of red. I can adjust the width. All of these sliders are things that I can change. But what I'd really like to see is what it looks like in my finished rendered project. Thanks to Arnold, the new renderer that Maya uses, we can see that in real time. If I come up to Arnold and choose render, it will allow me to, and it's going to take a second, it'll allow me to see my render in real time, which means as I move things around, I'll close the Hypershade here for a second. As I move things around here, I will see them being rendered, which means it's converting all of that 3D data into a 2D image, including all the lighting and shadows, reflections, refractions, all of those really advanced things. The reason why I can't see anything right now is because I don't have a light at all. And at least temporarily, what I'm going to use for a light is I'm going to come back up here to where it says Arnold, Lights, and choose this physical sky. And the physical sky is just a default lighting system. It gives me these lighting settings I can do. So what it actually is, if I close this for a second, is it creates this giant sky dome, which appears as black on my screen. It may be a little different for you. But when I click on this sky dome, I can adjust some things about the sky dome, including right here, its physical sky. And so I can change, we'll open up my renderer again. So as I move on here, I'm starting to see what it will actually render as. The black down here is the bottom of the horizon. I haven't found a great solution to the sky ending right at that point, but I'm working on it. The intensity here is how bright the sky is. Elevation is what time of day it is. So right above is directly noon. 0 is at dusk, and it even makes the light more orange as we go. I'm going to go ahead and create a plane here, so just so you can see. So I'm going to click on plane and expand it out so that I can see the shadows that are reflecting on the ground. And so I also have, click back on my sky dome, go back to physical sky. I can change the azimuth, which is where the sun is. You can see those shadows spinning around. And so I have a lot of control over it, and I can see that in real time by adjusting that. And if I zoom in here, you can see that my marble is really shiny, and you can see a little bit of that marble texture. These dots are noise, and the noise comes from just using lower render settings because I want to see it really quickly, and so it just renders it faster basically at a lower quality, and I can turn that up later when I'm finished, but for now it's perfect for render view. And so now I can reuse that. If I come back to my Hypershade, I can make some other changes in that marble. Maybe I want to adjust we have things like, zoom in on this so you can see it in the render view. I need more screens. I can change the diffusion. All of these sliders do things, and it's really nice now that you can just kind of slide them and see what happens on your finished thing. The noise attributes, that's how it kind of randomizes those veins in there. I'm going to change these to 2 by 2. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And so now I can use the same material on other things. So I can select multiples, or if I've already had them as a group from before, I can select them all at once and then right click on this marble and say assign it to selection so that they're all marble. There's all sorts of things that I can do now because those things are set up. Now let's bring in another one. I've mentioned this in previous tutorials. Arnold has its own set of materials that are really useful. They have the standard surface. So if I type in, it's AI standard, but if you type in standard, you'll get it. And this standard surface is really nice because it's got a lot more controls than maybe your standard materials do. And it also has these presets. So if I click on this preset and I choose gold and say replace, now this one, I'm going to rename it to gold. Now it's a gold material. And if I drag it to my dome here, you can see in the render view that that dome is now gold. It's very reflective. I'm even getting a reflection of the sun. There I'm getting reflections from the other columns and everything else as well. And so these preset materials are really great. And if I want to use another one, I can go to standard surface again, and maybe this one I want it to be more of a, let's see, I thought I saw brushed metal. So I'm going to use brushed metal for that one. Maybe all of my wire work there. I'm going to pause it and select all of these. All right, I held down Shift and selected all of those wire things in there and then grouped them so I can get back to them again. But now, if I go to my brush metal, right click and assign material to selection, they should all be updated with that new material. All right, that's where I minimize that again. Now I can see that brushed metal. And so I can create my own textures. I can even apply images on them, which is something I'll talk about in a future tutorial. I can use these preset ones. I have a lot of options. And all of these have really cool effects in that renderer. So it's important to stay use that render view so that you can see them as they go, the changes that you're making. So I'm going to maybe add brush metal to this sword in the middle here. And now I'm going to make a thong so it's shiny for the hilt and stuff. I'll make it blue. Make the master sword. I'm just middle dragging onto the things. These all probably are going to be, I'll shift click to unselect the ground. In fact, if I do this, these should all be marble except for the sword. So now if I right click and I say assign material to selection, maybe they'll all be marble. Maybe I want the ground to be different. I just have a lot of options, and as I'm doing this and I look at, oh, I don't know what that shiny thing is there, but I'm concerned about it. It seems to really exist because it's reflecting. Okay, something strange was happening with my physical sky, this sky dome. So I just selected it, hit delete, and then went back to Arnold Lights Physical Sky, and that seemed to get rid of that strange purple thing that was appearing for reasons I'm not sure of. So I'm back here. I'm going to add some lighting effects now. Now there's a couple of cool things that you can do with that standard surface. If I click on standard surface, one of the presets is this incandescent bulb. And so if I drag that, I'm going to drag that up onto this top thing, that will create something that has the illusion of creating light. Now, in addition to that, I have this emission, and emission will be how it'll actually create light, and I believe this weight, I'll put in a very large number and see what happens. Yeah, depending on the emission weight, you can see that this light's actually casting light around, and some of that light is being reflected off of that other one. So if I select all of these spheres on the top, holding down Shift, and apply this, which I'll call light. Depending on the weight of that, let's go to 500 and see what happens in my render view. That's pretty bright. I missed one of them. And you can even specify with that, go back to this light. Double clicking on a material brings its viewer back up, and all of these things are things that you can mess with. Sometimes it can be a little intimidating. You have your specular highlights, you have all sorts of things that can all be affected, but at the very least those presets are pretty great. Now while I'm here, I really want the sword in the middle of this area here to stand out. So I'm going to create just a regular light. I'm going to go to Create Lights, Point Light. And this point light is a physical thing, so I can press W and move it. I don't need to resize it, but I do need to strengthen its intensity. So when I'm selected on that light, I can come here to one of its attributes and press Control A to get back to the attribute editor if you don't have it, and I can turn that intensity up. And for these regular Maya lights in Arnold Render, you have to go really big on them. So it's like not from 1 to 10, but it's like a lot more than that. And I can, you can see, so awesome, this render view. I can actually see in real time what this light appears to be doing to my scene. So I'm trying to create some moody light here. And it's really fast once you get all the what you want figured out. Go back to standard surface, make another one of these. And this time, which one have I not used? Did I already use frosted glass? Let's see what it looks like on. So I'm going to drag it onto these. In fact, I think I'm just going to shift click and select them all. And right click, hold it down, assign material to selection. This one, I'll make another standard surface. You can see very quickly why it's nice to, so this was glass. And this one I'm going to do maybe I'll do a unique one there and see how it works out, not use one of the presets. But each new change I make is creating more of this. So I'm going to go ahead and pause it and do a little bit more, and then we'll talk about what the next step is in this process. Alright, so I still have some finishing touches to make, but this, I like the way the lighting is. I've added some extra lights. These are called, in Arnold, if you look under lights, you have these photometric lights. Oh, actually, this was an area light, and that kind of creates a square of light that is consistent throughout. So I think I'm pretty much ready to do the next part. Now, I'm not super thrilled with this just flat gray surface. I want to create some ground for it to exist in. The problem with that is that ground can be difficult to create. There are a lot of programs like World Machine that can do that for us. I'm going to use Mudbox, and in the next tutorial we'll talk about some of the things that you can do to create a really cool terrain very quickly in Mudbox, and then I will bring that terrain into this scene and finish this.